Hello? Oh, there we are. Great. Well, hello everybody. Whether you're here in the church building or happily at home, we are glad you've all been able to join us on this St. Patrick's Day. So St. Patrick's Day every year is celebrated, particularly in America. And I know it has connection to the Irish, and it works out great for TNT because our colors are green anyway. But on top of our regular TNT green, I put on a lime green shirt today and a hat. But I hope the blinking is not too distracting. I hope not. We had a question over here. What was the question over here? Oh, nothing. Just for stretching. That's okay. All right. So we are going to be talking about St. Patrick and connecting it with our first lesson of our last section. So we're in part 4 of your TNT books, and our lesson each week is super important because we're now tying up the year. So our lesson for today, of course, you know from your discussion groups, is on grace. We're going to talk about it. So the point we're making here about St. Patrick's Day, let's first talk about the day itself. So some of our holidays in America, the dates move around. Other holidays in America, the dates are always the same. So don't talk about St. Patrick's Day, but talk to me about the other holidays. Can you name one holiday that's always on the exact same day every year?
The 4th of July.
4th of July is always on the 4th of July. Doesn't matter if that's a Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Sunday. The 4th of July is always the 4th of July. I'm looking for another one of our holidays that is always on the exact same day.
Christmas.
Christmas is always on December 25th on the Gregorian calendar. So yes, there's another example of a holiday that always stays the same. I'm now looking for one of our holidays that moves. It's not always on the same exact date. It usually is around the same time, but not always the exact same date.
Easter.
Easter is, of all our holidays, the one that moves the most. We're actually in the Easter season, the Lenten season, as we're counting down the days to celebrating the resurrection of Jesus. Does anybody know, actually, how we determine when Easter is? You may not have realized this, but sometimes Easter is in March. Sometimes it's early April. Sometimes it's late April. Yeah. We've had some Easters, there's snow on the ground. We've had some Easters, it's so hot you need the air conditioning because Easter moves around. Looking for anybody on this side that thinks they know how they even decide when Easter is. David Lee thinks he knows. Why are you so far away, Michael? You're hardly even in the camera shot.
I don't know exactly how it works, although I know Easter is based off Passover, which is a Jewish holiday, which I think is based off of the moon.
Excellent. Did you hear that? The Christian celebration of resurrection is, of course, connected to the celebration of Passover. God said when the ancient Jews should celebrate Passover, and the ancient Jews did, in fact, have a calendar that was based on the phases of the moon. And so our Easter is based on the phases of the moon. You may not have realized that, but that's the way it is. We still don't know exactly how to figure it out, though. I think Daniel has a suggestion.
This might not be right, but I think that I know it's, what's it called, 3 days after Good Friday, right? Yes. And Good Friday, is Good Friday the day after Passover?
Well, it depends. We're trying to figure out how do we determine when Passover is. Yeah.
Is it a new moon?
Ah, excellent. So now we're getting to another point about Easter itself. There's something called a new moon. So a new moon is when you look at the sky and there's no moon at all. That's called a new moon. You might say, why is that called new? There's no moon at all. Because in a month, the amount of light that the moon reflects is changing. We call those the phases of the moon. Sometimes it's just a little sliver. Sometimes it looks like a banana. Sometimes it looks like a half of a circle. Sometimes it looks like it's almost a total circle. And sometimes it's a perfect full circle that we call a full moon. So here's the answer. I have to figure it out. Easter is set. It's the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. And so that's why it's sometimes in March, because the spring equinox is the day that spring starts. And you know that sometimes spring starts on March 21st, sometimes it starts on March 20th, sometimes March 22nd. So that day is always pretty close to when it starts. But that day happens unrelated to when the moon might be there. So you could have the first full moon on the first Sunday after the full moon be already on March 23rd, theoretically. If the full moon was on March 20th and the equinox was on the 22nd, you'd have to wait a whole month for the full moon. So that brings us to April 22nd. And if April 22nd would be a Monday, you'd have to wait another whole 6 days. So it is possible that Easter can be as late as April 28th. That's Easter, and that's coming up. But the holiday we're looking at is St. Patrick's Day. And St. Patrick's Day is one of those days that's always on March 17th. It is not an official holiday. Schools are open, banks are open, post office is open. But it is a day that many people, especially in America, they want to remember, and they want to celebrate it. And because it is connected with Ireland, green is the color they wear. And because it's connected with Ireland and St. Patrick, they use the three-leafed clover as part of that. So symbols of clovers, symbols of green, symbols of Ireland. The original St. Patrick's Day has nothing to do with leprechauns, pots of gold, or rainbows. Those things were added later on, and they don't really mean much. It's just like Easter. Easter is celebrating Jesus coming back from the dead. What does that have to do with marshmallow candies and chocolate-covered eggs and a rabbit who throws plastic grass around? Really nothing, right? So we add a lot of things to the holiday celebrations. But we want to be those who know what the real reasons are and celebrate those real reasons. So even with my gleaming, glistening, blinking hat with its, are these sequins on here? What would you call that? They kind of are. Aren't they kind of like that? Yeah, they are. Good. Even with all that on there, the real story behind St. Patrick is what we're going to talk about today. We're also going to talk about grace, and we're going to talk about God's grace. And they're all connected. You'll see how. So let's talk about St. Patrick. Sometimes people think, well, March 17th, that must be the birthday of St. Patrick. But the situation is when St. Patrick was born, what today we call England wasn't England. It was a region that the Romans had called Britannica because the people who lived there were called Britons. And the Roman Empire, the same Roman Empire that controlled the country of Jesus, same Romans, they controlled a vast area of the world. Those Romans, by the time St. Patrick was born, they had already left Britain. And they had brought Christianity, so Christianity was already in Britain. And so St. Patrick in his village, there were people who called themselves Christians and who were Christians. St. Patrick he was raised, he was supposed to believe these things. According to what we know about him, it looks like he was raised that way but didn't really believe it. And maybe some of you feel that way. Maybe some of you are raised in houses that your parents are very committed to Jesus. They bring you to church. Maybe you're here at AWANA and you participate and you like it, but you're not really sure that you've given your life to Jesus. You're not really sure what that's all about. Maybe you're like that. That's the way young Patrick was. Patrick lived near the western part of what we call England today. And in those days, people would go to the beach just to go fishing. You wouldn't go there just to hang out. You wouldn't go there to fly kites and, just walk along the shore because it was dangerous. You never knew when some bad people might not show up. And so St. Patrick and other kids, his actual, he was called St. Patrick later on. His real name is Edgamund or something like that. It was a Briton name. At any rate, we know him as St. Patrick. He was on the beach. And I don't quite remember the story if he was sent there to go fishing or if he was walking back from somewhere. But while he was on the beach, some pirates grabbed him. And I know sometimes here in America, we kind of make fun of pirates and we say, let's talk like a pirate, arrgh! And, we think pirates are fun. But pirates are people that they steal. That's how they survive. They don't sit down and work hard and, have a regular job. They just steal. And a lot of people say, oh, I have buried treasure. Well, that buried treasure was stolen from somebody. And they didn't just steal treasure. They would steal people. So young Patrick was stolen, from the coast, kidnapped, and brought back to an area that today we call Ireland. Back in those days, it was called Hibernia. Brought back to a place called Ireland, Hibernia, today called Ireland. And the people there had never been under the Romans. The people there had never been in a Christian area. There weren't Christians in Hibernia. And so these pirates who came from Hibernia, they've stolen him, they bring him back and sell him as a slave. And in those days, people from Hibernia, if they wanted a worker, they would go and they would buy these kidnapped people. And so St. Patrick was made the slave. He didn't really enjoy his work. On one level, we ought to say, what did the pirates deserve? What did they really do? If we're talking about what the pirates should have gotten was what? Nothing. They stole young kids and sold them. And they got money when they sold them back as slaves, but they shouldn't have gotten the money. In fact, we have to say, they really shouldn't have gotten nothing. They should have gotten something. And that something was what? A punishment. They are kidnapping people. Right? They really should have been jailed for what they were doing. They what? No, they should have been jailed for what they're doing, right? And someone should have stopped them from doing it. But in those days, there was no strong government to stop that from happening. Well, young Patrick didn't really like his life, and he hoped that one day he would see his family again. And it occurred that he had a dream one night that he should go back to the coast and get a boat and go back home. He wasn't sure. Is that a message from God? Should he really go? But he did. So he runs away. And in those days, if you ran away from your owner, you could be killed. So it was risky to do. He didn't have money. He got to the edge of the beach on this island, which today we call Ireland. He got there and didn't have the money for it. There was a captain who was there, who was heading over back to his homeland, what today we call England, in those days Britain. And they said, well, we're going back there. We'll take you back. So young Patrick was on this boat, made it back to his homeland, and went back to his home village. And you can just imagine how pleasantly surprised the people were. They didn't know what happened to him. Had the young boy run away? Had he maybe had an accident at the beach and died? They didn't know. But now they knew he was back. So they were excited, and they were so grateful that he was back. They thought he was dead, but he's alive again. And here we have to say, did Patrick deserve to go back to safety? Had he earned it? No. We had already said that as a young guy, he wasn't really sure about Christianity. He wasn't really living for God. But that whole experience, when he realized God has now blessed him, right? He thinks that God gave him the message to go back. He walks all that distance, doesn't get arrested, isn't caught, doesn't have money, but then finds a boat and a captain who'll take him back. All these are blessings from God. And he realized he didn't deserve any of that. And back in his hometown, in his home area, he said, you know what, I need to follow this God who's done so many great things for me. So he gives his life to Jesus. We might say, well, there's a real example of grace, isn't it? You know, in your discussion groups, you talked about that grace is undeserved. nothing that Patrick really did made him deserve to get kidnapped by these pirates. But at the same time, nothing that he really did made it so that God owed him. God didn't owe him to be saved and brought back. And even if he comes back physically to see his family, he had even a better treasure than that. His soul. He'd given himself to God. And he had this excitement about Jesus and this joy in Jesus. He had a new love for the Christianity that so many people back in his hometown had. And then you know what? He made a super decision. He said, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to the very country where those people stole me, because they keep stealing people. They don't know Jesus. They mistreat people. They rob. They rob from ships. They rob people from beaches. They're thieves. They're liars. They're cheats, and they need Jesus. Daniel, how do you think his family and his friends from his home area, what did they think about him going back to the area where they had enslaved him? What do you think?
Probably pretty angry, but I think I know something that he did to try to help the people who didn't know Jesus.
Well, let's first think about what his family and his friends might have said. I imagine it wouldn't be so much anger as maybe they're afraid. They're afraid if he goes back there. Look, we already said, if you're a slave and run away, what's the punishment possibly? They might kill you. And if they don't kill you, they might capture you again and make you a slave again. Now, at this point, he's no longer a young boy, right? He's a man. So it might be a little tougher to catch him. But he still did run away. And he could still be punished. He could get there, and the people could say, we don't want to hear your message about God. They had their own gods. They had their own spirits they worship, their own beliefs. And sometimes if you go to somebody and tell them, you know what, you're believing the wrong thing, sometimes those people do get angry. So he was risking death, again, not just for being a slave, but the people might have responded and said, you shut up, we're going to kill you. But Patrick said, I've got to go back. They don't know God. God has done a great job in my heart, and these people need to know Jesus. So he goes with the church's blessing. The church says, go to Hibernia. He goes there, and he begins working among the people of what we today call Ireland. It wasn't easy work. It wasn't as if suddenly everybody turned to Christianity, but some did. And then those people told others, and other people saw how those people's lives changed. And before Patrick died, almost every area, so it wasn't really a kingdom, they were kind of local chiefs, almost every area of Ireland had at least one church before he died. So that's why today, Ireland, the country of Ireland, they call St. Patrick their patron saint, because they recognize that, humanly speaking, he brought the message of God to them. And they're thankful to God for that, and that's how it became a holiday. Daniel has an idea about maybe one of the ways that St. Patrick used to talk to the people. Let's find out what Daniel has to say as far as how St. Patrick did that.
He showed them a 3-leaf clover, and he showed them about how it was 3 in 1, like the Trinity.
Excellent. So I wasn't there. We don't know exactly how that all happened. There's some stories that he did other miracles with snakes and he healed people. I don't know all that. I can just say the stories that have been passed down, that he was trying to describe how you can have 3 and yet be 1, and that he used this clover, this shamrock, with these 3 leaves on it and said, look, there's 3 leaves here, but it's 1 clover. All the leaves look the same. They are connected, and yet they are individual leaves. So he used that to describe the Trinity. Maybe that happened. Maybe it didn't. I don't know, but we can for sure say that Christianity was not in Ireland, and it was brought there. Back to our question of grace. Did the country of those pirates, thieves, and bandits, did they deserve to hear the message of Jesus? Did they deserve forgiveness? Did they earn love? None of that. And that's the wonder of the gospel. It's not earned. It's not a payment for your hard work. God just gives it freely. And that's what St. Patrick did. He said, I want to go back there and give them back freely. I know they're wicked people. I know they did wrong to me and to other people. But they still need the love of God, and God can forgive them the way he forgives all our sins. And really, if you understand the Bible message, all of us have committed sins. Sometimes we say, oh, well, pirates, they kidnap people and steal, and so they really should be punished. But remember, the sin that Adam and Eve do, the sin that God said, if you do this, you will die. What was that sin? Eli? Excellent. Eat the fruit out of the tree. God didn't say to them in the Garden of Eden, kill somebody and I'll kill you. He didn't say, if you punch somebody, I have to punish you forever. No, he just said, eat a piece of fruit because it's disobedience. And that's the important thing that we all have to recognize, that all of us have done things as bad and certainly worse than eating a piece of fruit. And so anyone who says, oh, well, God is all loving and God merciful, he is all loving and merciful, but he hates sin and has to punish it. And that's why Jesus took that punishment. That's why Easter is the biggest holiday for Christians. I know sometimes kids say to me, well, isn't it Christmas? Well, the Christmas story is not in every gospel of the Bible. It's only in 2 of the 4 gospels. But the death of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus, that's in all 4. That's how important it is. And if you read in Paul's letters, he does talk about things like God taking on a form of a human. That's part of the Christmas story. That's there. But over and over he talks about what Jesus did on the cross, what he accomplished with the resurrection, the power of God that works through this resurrection life. So Easter is really the bigger holiday for Christians. And that's, of course, the season that we find ourselves in. So St. Patrick takes the name Patrick when he becomes a leader in the church. He didn't deserve to get stolen. He likewise didn't deserve to be freed. Those pirates who kidnapped him, as far as we know, they were never put in jail. As far as we know, they never said sorry. As far as we know, they never really had to make up for all the wrong things that they did. But even if they didn't deserve God's forgiveness, they didn't deserve Patrick's forgiveness, they didn't deserve the love of anybody, that's not the message of the gospel. The message of the gospel is we love those who are enemies of Jesus. We turn to them in love and give them grace. And that, of course, is the focus of your discussion there. One more term before we wrap things up here and set you free to your can-do people who haven't gotten it yet from last week. The word saint. Now, many people today, they use the word saint to mean a very special person or a super holy person or a very, very Christian person. But you know what? When the Bible was written, that word saint, it just meant any Christian. All Christians were considered saints. They were all now God's people. And so it's okay to say St. Patrick because he was a believer in Jesus, and so he's one of the saints. And if you believe Jesus, if you're living for Jesus, if God is in your heart, guess what? You are also a saint. Because that's what the Bible says, that we are saints. We are those who are chosen, who are set aside for God's glory. We're the children of God. So it shouldn't trouble you that we call him Saint Patrick. Again, I know that some groups of people, they want to use the word saint just to mean a special holy person or somebody who has done special miracles. The Bible doesn't use the word that way. The Bible says, if you have given yourself to Jesus, Jesus has done the miracle for you. You now have new life. The old man, the old person is now dead, and you have God's Spirit in you. That is the great miracle. So if you want a miracle for being a saint, that's what it is. And you shouldn't be ashamed to remember St. Patrick on St. Patrick's Day. So on this day, maybe you had some cabbage today. Maybe you're wearing green, especially for St. Patrick's Day. Maybe like me, you're wearing a goofy hat. When I was teaching at school, I have a tie with, green clovers on it. That's all fun, but the real meaning of St. Patrick's Day is this love for others. God's love for us as sinners, and the love that we can then extend to others. We got a question here from David Lee. Yes, David?
Well, actually, St. Patrick's Day, the tradition, I guess, it kind of came from Ireland over to the U.S. From a lot of stuff, but mainly from the Great Potato Famine in the 1800s, I think, because lots of Irish people moved over, and then their traditions then passed on to the Americans.
He's right on. The Irish people came by the millions during a terrible time in the 1800s when they had so little food in their own island. They came to America. Not only did they bring their traditions of St. Patrick's Day, there's one other American holiday that is also connected with the Irish that we celebrated some months ago here. Last one here, Daniel, and then we're going to go to get our snacks.
New Year?
Not New Year, but Halloween. Halloween traditions, the idea of carving up the pumpkin, this comes from the Irish. They had a long-standing tradition, which is also pre-Christian, where they would try to scare away the evil spirits by carving local vegetables. They didn't have pumpkins in Ireland, but they had other little vegetables in gourds, and they would carve those up and put lights in them to scare away the evil spirits. So those traditions have also come to America from Ireland. Then when they became popular in America, then they spread other places. So today, even my cousins in Germany, they now do Halloween. They didn't do Halloween when I was a kid, but in these last 40 years, because Americans do it, it becomes popular other places. So probably in a couple of years, they're going to be doing St. Patrick's Day in other countries too. We actually celebrate St. Patrick's Day more than they do in Ireland. I don't know if you know that. In Ireland, they do not dye the rivers green. Everybody doesn't go and, go drink beverages that are dyed green. It's not part of what they look at us Americans and think we're weirdos. Like, what are you doing? But, when we celebrate here, we celebrate with gusto. All right. So I'm not sure who got their food last week and who didn't. So I'm going to leave it up to Miss Lindsay, who's going to call your names now. So stay where you're sitting. Again, we'll call you up to go to the back, and we'll also call you when your parents are here. If you're back at home, thank you very much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.